We go. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Speaker.
Well,
Feels like you should be in the
thanks
fucking
for the
Houses of Parliament,
thanks
mate.
for the opportunity.
Oh, give over, mate. You spoke over in Nottingham. Why? When? What?
Yes,
Why?
yep.
How?
So
Talk to me.
that was far out. It's flying almost probably 2 months ago now. Over here, I guess probably to sort of zoom out a little bit, there are three major governing bodies of strength and conditioning in the world. I would probably say there's the ASCA, which is the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association, which is what I'm accredited by. There's the NSCA, which is America, and then there's the UKSCA. Probably for a deal of time, they were reasonably separated. But in recent times, they seem to have amalgamated a little bit more and been more collaborative. And in recent times, there has been a presenter exchange program. So essentially, based on the level that I am for the ASCA, which is an ASCA Elite Level 3, there's one more sort of step to go. So I need to be at level 3 for a few years, but they'll send an email at the start of the year and say, are you open to being involved in this exchange program? And if you are, potentially what topics could you present on? So I clicked yes and sent through a couple of little options, sort of not imagining that it would be something that I'd be selected for. And yeah, fast forward maybe 7 or 8 months down the track, I got an email saying, hey, you're keen to go in 3 or 4 weeks' time. I was like, let's go. So I showed it to my wife, and we've got 2 young kids, and she said, well, I'm coming with you. I said, all right. So we made it happen. So seriously grateful for the opportunity. We scooted over. I dropped her off at some family's place, and then I hired a car and drove about 3 hours to Nottingham and had a ball. It was a wonderful weekend. One of probably the most enjoyable professional development experiences that I had. Definitely nerve-wracking. Certainly here in Australia, you find there's always 2 degrees of separation. So, if you go to one of these events, it doesn't take long for you to find some sort of link or network to somebody. I probably found to probably push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit more in this circumstance, because obviously it's a little more separated from home. I was very fortunate that there was 2 Australian guys that went over who are involved in the ASCA. So Dan Baker and Peter Currell, who are 2 of sort of the big top dogs. But also I'd been networking with a guy called Dan Howells via LinkedIn, actually. I'd seen his mentorship program and reached out to him, and he's been a fantastic mentor for me over the last 6 months. So he was there on day 1 and helped us settle the nerves. Day 1 of the conference, I presented on a systematic approach to exercise selection in a gym setting. So trying to help alleviate some of the issues that we see in particularly early stage coaches. Then I had a day off on Saturday, so got to sit and listen to lots of wonderful presenters and undertake a lot of fantastic practicals. And then again, I presented on the last day too, which was more about microdosing strength training in non-professional environments, which is what I see, probably 95% of S+C coaches around the world. That's the level of sport they're undertaking. And often you go to these conferences and there's some wonderful presentations, but it might be sort of at that top 1%. You need force platforms, timing gates, and accelerometers to be able to implement your learnings. Probably 95% of the people in this room can't undertake that. So what's a way that potentially they can manipulate and adapt those principles in the meantime so that they can close the gap between where they are now and where they want to be when they get to the point in the industry.
Was that predominantly in the youth environment, or was that adults, or what were you talking about here, mate?
Yeah, so the case study that I utilised was definitely adults. So how it works over here in Australia is, it can vary from country to country, because I know, for example, there's not much, I would say, social or amateur sport in America, as far as I know. I know, you sort of play college, and then if you don't make it from college, you just get into a job, and that's your life, and you're a supporter. Whereas in Australia, the social and the amateur sporting culture is pretty massive. Yeah. So you'd find that, I'm just putting a rough number on it, but I would say at least 70% of people are involved in some sort of casual sport, whether that be Australian rules football, netball, basketball, rugby league, for example. They'll play some sport on the weekend. So the case study I utilise is what we call our Division 1 amateur footballers here in South Australia. So you've got the AFL, which is obviously your professional league. You've got the Sandful, which is the state league under that, the South Australian. And then you've got your amateur league, at which there's probably, I think, 7 different divisions. One of the contracts we have through my private performance center PEAQ is with one of the Division 1 clubs. So it's still a reasonable level of football, but they train once or twice a week and play on the weekend. And that's it. Yeah. That's all the exposure you get to them. So we sort of sit down and identify, we'll say, pretty much in that environment there, all strength training is abolished. There's no chance. You get in a room with your 30 to 60 athletes in a gym space and undertake a gym program together like you might do with a semi-professional or a professional team. So if you don't have that, you're relying on them to go and potentially source it themselves outside of what you're doing, of which maybe there's a small percentage that do that. But if not, if you can't guarantee that, what are some creative ways that you can maximize your time with those athletes? I would argue that at that amateur level, you probably don't want to be detracting from the skill and tactical work and getting speed dose and all those sorts of things, because I'd argue that is much more important. I think that strength training and power training is your cream on the top. And I love my strength training, don't get me wrong, but if you had to sort of prioritize or put those in a list of priorities, strength training will probably be towards the bottom. I'd probably say speed work first, get your repeated sprint exposure every week, because that's going to be really vital in increasing their capacity and hopefully increasing their resilience to soft tissue injury, particularly from a hamstring fascicle length point of view. From their skills and tactical work, because that's probably going to be a greater differentiator than how much they can RDL or back squat. And then, that strength work at the end is probably the last of the priorities in an amateur setting, I would argue. And there might be some people that disagree, but that's sort of how I envisage it. So then you say, okay, well, as an S&C coach, usually in an amateur environment, once the pre-season is finished, you really get maybe 3 exposures of maybe a maximum of 15 to 20 minutes per week, of which, so you might have to do the warm-up, the prep, the prep. How can you periodize and creatively manipulate that preparation so that you're doing some strength exercises as opposed to just doing knee highs and butt kicks? Because, for a long period of time, the old amateur warm-up has been sitting around in a circle, do a static stretch, you do a jogging lap around the oval, and then you do knee highs and butt kicks, and then you're ready to go. So can you be doing Nordics pre-training? Can you be doing some isometric holds? Can you be doing some pushing against each other? Can you do some side plank abduction variations? Can you be doing single leg calf iso holds on the sidelines, all those sorts of things? So how can you manipulate and almost treat your physical preparation, in that warm-up setting as a gym program? And we sort of fleshed it out from there. So it was certainly in an adult setting, but in saying that, you've probably got athletes from 17 all the way through to 38 and everything in between. It's a real mixed bag of lollies out in amateur sporting settings. So, but it seemed to get a pretty good response. I had a lot of questions afterwards, which were really thought provoking and some great feedback from the participants. I guess I'll deviate slightly in terms of the audience there. I was fortunate in a sense, but also, again, it was nerve-wracking that on the second day that I presented was in front of a bigger crowd, because it just happened to line up exactly straight after the Women's World Cup final. So UK obviously played Spain. Obviously it wasn't a fantastic result, but the atmosphere was awesome. They were all in the lunchroom. There was maybe 400 people watching the game, and then it sort of stopped, and then it was like, okay, Sean's presentation now. So they all sort of filtered into the lecture theatre. So I did have to bring the energy and the vibe of the room up a little bit, but it was good to speak in front of a crowd, which was good.
Wow. What would you say is the biggest difference in terms of strength and conditioning coaching for amateur and professional?
Great question. I think it's just access and time and probably logistics to the athletes you have. I think that the underlying principles you can absolutely manipulate and adapt to be appropriate for different levels. So just because you're working in an amateur sport doesn't mean that you don't want to increase your athlete's ability to repeatedly sprint, for example. You want high levels of repeated speed ability. You want your athletes to be durable. You want to, but it's just you just have the lower down you go, the greater importance you have on time management and the logistics of ensuring that you focus on the correct things. As I said, in that order there, in an elite sporting environment, you would imagine, I'm sure, there obviously are priorities and some things would get a greater deal of emphasis than other things. But I would say that the emphasis or the attention or time provided to each of those categories we talked about before, participant ability and game and sim and tactical and strength training, there's less of a difference than maybe when you're at amateur levels. That difference is greater. There's a greater sort of bandwidth. So you just have to be really good at saying, well, I'm going to be very clear as to what I believe is going to have a greater impact at this level, and we'll prioritize that. And if we get more time, then certainly we can start to dose in, at different points in time. So maybe, for example, we're going to go and be able to provide a strength training session for this group of guys because they want to come in off their own back. They want to go above and beyond their one training session and one game per week. So that's probably it, to be honest with you. And then I think is using your intuition a little bit more as well. So absolutely, at the top level, you don't rely completely on data. I think there was a point in time there where I thought that data informed every single decision that you make.
Yeah.
When in fact, that plays a small part in it. You're going to utilize that information, but still it comes down to your coaching intuition and experience to make the appropriate decisions. So you might look at GPS data, wellness data. You might look at the lift that they've done that week, how much speed distance they've done. You sort of put all these pieces of the puzzle together and then make an assessment out of that. Really, the lower you go down, the less and less information that you're going to be provided. You just have to try to make more creative decisions, I imagine. So you might not have GPS data. You might send them out sort of a wellness questionnaire on a Google Sheet instead of in TeamBuilder, for example, because the club might not sort of have the resources to be able to provide that. And you are basing a lot of your decisions on conversations that you have and observations as a coach. So it's actually not a bad thing to expose yourself as much as possible to amateur environments. Even if you're in the pro sector, can you delve out every now and again and go have a look and see, can you challenge your coach's eye when you don't have some of these resources to be able to lean back on? So hopefully that answers your question.
No, I love that, mate. Like challenging the eye, it really sticks out to me. And we got to remind ourselves that we're dealing with people, human beings, and those soft skills are really important. And, if something doesn't quite look right, it probably because it isn't, and it's like, well, I can't quite put my finger on it. Yeah. Okay. Then go to the data and have a little dive in behind under the hood, so to speak. But no, you've got to assess what's going on. Maybe there's something psychological going on with the athlete, and I think working with a wider base of demographic, 17 to fucking mid 40s, amateur level sport or past injuries, past whatever they've done. Maybe this is the first time that they've ever played rugby league, Aussie rules, cricket, and they're 39. All right, mint, and they've done nothing. That's a bit of a different body that we've got in front of us than a 17-year-old who's just played it all their life and is nimble and can do whatever. And you could basically kick them with a spiked bat and they'll be sound. They can get up and go again tomorrow. It's like, you've got to see the difference and be like, right, well, I've got a team, but they're all a team of individuals. And how are they moving compared to yesterday? Rather than just red, amber, green. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's take those pieces of data and then just shove them in. Like, no. We have to deal with the athlete in front of us. Right. And it's something that
it's funny. I don't know if you found the same thing, but I've sort of come full circle. I remember maybe in the very, very early days thinking, I backed myself in and, observed athletes and made decisions based on looks and conversations and those sorts of things. And then maybe the influence of the industry and maybe education as you got access to more and more bits of info, then there was probably a stage in my career where, we get somebody on the force platforms and they jumped 24 centimeters instead of 27 centimeters. I'm like, nah, that's it. We're going to deload him, just based off of that one number. Where I look back now and go, what was I thinking? You sort of go full circle and talking and trying to seek out some big players in the industry, some high performance managers that I know that are much better than me, and talking to them. And before sort of having the opportunity to catch up, thinking that these guys are going to be speaking on a scientific level and a data analysis level that I just can't understand. And when you realize that actually the best guys in the industry, they have a really great awareness of the human aspect of what we do as coaches. So it's sort of gone full circle around. It's like people, that's everything that I do has to be data driven. Actually, no, let's find this sort of happy medium where, yes, we observe and pay attention to the data, but that doesn't absolutely decipher exactly what we end up doing with that athlete.
Yeah, I think we have to find a happy medium, that balance. We really, really do. It's the data is there for a reason. It's beneficial, right? But it is a face-to-face role for a reason. That's beneficial too. You've got to be able to like smell it in the air and feel the tickle on your taint and be like, actually, we're gonna scrub the board. Nah, fuck that. We're gonna go do something else. And sometimes they're the best sessions. Let's be honest. You can write this quote unquote perfectly, extravagant program or whatever you've done. Oh, this session is just stunning, right? And you come in like, yeah, that's not going to work. Fuck. Okay, that's just taken me 3 hours to then construct, and I'm just going to respectfully punt it to the side of the room and then just go figure out this thing on the fly, right? And I got a question. What's the biggest similarity you found within the best strength and conditioning coaches that you've happened to rub shoulders with and shake hands and look in the eye?
I've probably almost already touched on it. I think just that human touch and being very personable, I think almost trumps anything else. Your ability, and again, if you sort of blend a few of our answers that we've already touched base on, try not to be too repetitive here. But in those, situations that you said, in which maybe you have to go back to the drawing board, they're very adaptable. They don't necessarily write the perfect programs as you talked about, but they write programs that create buy-in. They're very good at educating without overwhelming athletes. So they will have a really creative way to tell you why this is important as to why you're doing it, without going onto a deep anatomical level to say, I want you to be feeling this in psoas muscle and the psoas muscle. They're really good at convincing you. To an extent, there's almost that sort of that psychological game. And I know that the tagline to this podcast is sort of bridging that gap between the mental and the physical side of strength and conditioning. The guys that can really get athletes to hang off every word, to want to undertake every session they have, whether they are perfect or imperfect sessions, and just to almost convince the athlete that their capacity is greater. I think it's really probably grown on me the fact that absolutely you can improve physical capacities through training, but I think you can improve physical capacities through psychology as well. And there's certainly outside of my realm, but I've seen these guys who do some sort of research and some upskilling in certain areas in regards to language and persuasiveness and communication and those sorts of things too. So it definitely, you have to have that science and that education to underpin what you're doing. But for the most part, if we're being completely transparent, if you're up to date in this industry, you're putting your spin on something that most people are doing in some sort of sense. We're doing our speed work. We're increasing our ability to produce force. We're increasing our ability to produce force rapidly, and we're trying to make our tissues as durable as possible. We're all doing that, in some sort of vein. How can you get the athlete to buy in? How can you get the coaching staff to buy in, to understand the importance and the relevance of what we're doing, to hopefully, complement the program that they're trying to roll out from a tactical and skill point of view. So it's definitely those personal skills for sure, those soft skills.
The soft skills. What emotion is elicited within you when I say the word coach?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. It's probably not something that I haven't been asked before, but I guess passion to a certain extent, because I do love this industry so much, and I've poured the better part of 15 years into it, almost. So certainly passion and I guess excitement, because I do really enjoy the opportunity to get face to face and to see improvements and to share the exhilaration of victory, and also share the disappointment of loss as well, and you sort of ride that emotional roller coaster. We always joke with my wife, she's gonna write a book on being the wife of an S+C coach and entrepreneur, it's like a roller coaster, you're up and down. Some days you burst through the door and go, this is the best thing. I'm like, I'm a superstar. Well, this is amazing. I'm killing it. And then other days, like, this is shit. I picked the wrong industry. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, day's been horrible. But in saying that as well, and again, going slightly off topic, I have talked to some people recently and seen some examples of some things that have happened both here and around the world at this point in time. And even a bad day as an S+C coach really relatively isn't a bad day. If somebody's pinged a hamstring or rolled their ankle, you're thinking, oh my God, like they're going to miss a couple of weeks here. Well, actually, a rolled ankle isn't really bad in the scheme of things, isn't it? When people are, just police officers going to work and bloody, seeing the worst 10% of people every day. And you can go to very extreme examples overseas at the moment and what people over there are having to deal with. So, really, at the end of the day, a bad day as a coach is probably a good day for anybody else,
Yeah, it's a strange way you pay your bills, right? Like we rock up with a sweater on and your trackies tucked in your socks and you're wearing some trainers and like you said, that fucking emotional roller coaster. Holy shit, it is up and down and around the
We just
houses.
put cones down, don't we? We just put cones down everywhere. That's how much.
Yeah, or a glorified DJ. That's another comment that I've heard. I'm like, okay, cool, bro.
I
No
tell you
problem.
what, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on song selection. There's a lot of criticism. I tell you that. You can make 3 of the athletes happy, and the other 13 are pissed, or vice versa. If you can get a playlist that makes your entire squad happy, you've done an amazing job for that session.
That's a class A coach, right? That's that level 4. That's
Absolutely.
That's when you get invited to speak at the world summits. How did you make that Spotify playlist? Yeah, it's funny, man. Like, it's definitely a journey and a roller coaster, but when you sit back and you zoom out and you observe, you're like, this is such a privilege. It really, really is. And it put things into perspective sometimes. You're like, oh, that really didn't fucking work and yada yada. You're like, yeah, probably 90% of the athletes didn't notice, probably more.
Absolutely.
Like, they got a session
It's
they're
funny.
good, leave them alone.
Yeah, it's almost it's like gambling. For example, the reason why pokies are so addictive is because every now and again you get like a big win, and it just sort of fuels you, and then you have 4 losses in a row. Like, oh no, next like we're gonna get it next week. It's like those little short spurts. There's some sort of psychology around it, but short spurts of massive exhilaration. Because in any sport, in any competition you're in, there's always heaps more losers than winners.
Yeah.
In the AFL, for example, you're looking at 18 to 20 teams. There's always going to be one team that wins a flag, and even the team that loses in the grand final, even though they're second, they leave that day feeling horrible and terrible. And really, if you went to the Olympics and did that, you get a silver medal. But probably where I'm going with this is just that addictiveness of small spurts. You win one premiership, you win a championship. Like, hey, this is the best feeling in the world. I want to get that again. And then you have 6 years where you don't get it, but then you get that little small spurt. So it's just like, it just keeps you hanging on. You just keep chasing after it.
I once heard that all professional athletes are addicts. And it's like you're a junkie for that feeling. And I'm like, well, I would have to agree a little bit, like they're definitely something upstairs where they're like an obsessive kind of individual. But then you get that athlete that comes in, you're like, you barely do anything and are a freak of nature.
That's always probably the most frustrating, isn't it? Because you're trying to promote to all these athletes how important your programming is, and there's just one person that just takes the piss and is the greatest athlete in the league. And there's always going to be those 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a million athletes, but generally you skew the odds in your favor if you undertake proper physical preparation. It's just those freaks that unfortunately don't help to support our theories.
Yeah, and everybody uses the exception to the rule to prove that it can be broken, right? And they're like, see, look, this person over here, you're like, yeah, like they were always going to play pro sport. They were going to play pro
Mm,
something. If it wasn't
mm,
American football, it was bloody Aussie rules. It'd be tiddlywinks. It'd be badminton. They'd have played something. You know, they are genetically speaking built different, and that's okay.
mm.
But that is
I
the
think
exception.
I think one of the greatest examples of that is if you sort of slow down, and I think if you go like pixel by pixel for Usain Bolt's first like 10 meters, his acceleration phase in his record-breaking 100-meter sprint is ugly. You know, you would never teach anybody that technique. And everybody's like, well, why aren't we teaching that? Why do we teach acceleration this way if he can break a world record doing it that way? Or so, you know, do you have the limb length? Do you have
You have the
the
Lindemann, yeah.
muscle fiber type? Do you have the, you know, tendon elasticity that or stiffness that that Usain Bolt has? If you do, sweet, don't stress about it. But if you don't, then let's get to work.
Yeah, and you're talking to like a 5'5" kid from the from the rural states. You're like, dude, like I don't think that's where we need to put our attention.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should focus
Absolutely.
on jumping a little bit higher and running a little faster and lifting a little heavier. And yeah, maybe we should maybe we should do that. You're like, see, look, you're like he's double your fucking height. Leave it alone.
Get us a little bit closer.
Brother, I got 3 questions.
Yes.
What's the greatest piece of life advice you've ever received?
Ooh. Admittedly, I probably can't put my finger on it, but maybe in that context, if I can't think of something specifically that's been said to me, but maybe something that just sort of across a journey is that there is always a bigger and better opportunity that will come across your path. So particularly in the S&C world, if there's any S&C coaches out there, there have been many times that I've both experienced myself and again talked to mentors of mine in which a door is closed, an opportunity is passed, you've been sacked from something, you interview for a job and think you've got it, but don't get it, whatever it might be. There's always a better opportunity that pops up. So just make sure you keep your skin in the game. You make sure you react to that adversity in the best way possible, because often people will drop their heads. And I know that's probably a really prime example in the S&C industry because it's pretty volatile.
Yeah.
I've lost contracts or I lost my job during COVID with Crows AFLW. And there was times where I just thought, mate, I just want to, what am I doing? This is silly. But once you get through that quick little emotional sort of spur, then and now I'm working in the WNBL and work with a wonderful group of athletes. Loving every second of it. So something bigger and better will always pop up for sure.
I like that a lot, man. It's definitely volatile, this industry.
Mm.
Definitely volatile. Like you feel like you've got some sort of security, and the next thing you're packing your box, and you're like, "Oh, okay, cool. I guess I gotta go somewhere else." Yeah, it's you got to keep going, man. You got to keep blazing your own path. That's for damn sure. And yeah, that I'm gonna take on board as well for myself. What about the worst? What's the
Definitely.
worst piece of life advice you've ever received?
Ooh. Again, another good one. Oh, I'm not sure about that, to be honest with you. Can we circle back right that in a sec? Because
100%.
I guess there's probably, I'm sure, probably to be honest with you, if I'm going to sit on the fence here with, I guess, flinders in my ass, I haven't heard too much bad advice really. In regard, I think that you should always take all pieces of advice and use your shit filter to make sure to sort of decipher whether it's worthwhile or not. I think that there are definitely pieces of advice that are better than others or worse, but I don't think there's necessarily anything that's bad. Everybody is probably trying to provide advice in most circumstances with hopefully your best intentions in mind, but maybe their experiences, their physiological makeup, their emotions, the way that they're sort of put together is different to you. So it's like a program. You could write a program, the same program, for two athletes, and they could get two completely different outcomes from it because of the way they undertake it, because of the intent that they have, because of the load they're able to lift or whatever. In the same context, you could give the same piece of advice to two people, and it could go in two separate sort of directions. So I'm going to sit on the fence here and say, look, there's no bad advice, but just make sure you've got a really good shit filter.
Best bullshit filter in the gym is the shutter doors, right? Turn yourself around and fuck off somewhere else. I'm sure there's an F45 out there somewhere for you.
Definitely.
Don't mean to throw anyone under the bus, but enjoy it. What are the 3 words you would tell your younger self?
Consistency. I know it's such a boring word, and people want sort of, you know, that magic fix, and they want everything right now. And we live in an age in which, you know, you get immediate feedback from everything you do on your phone, and you know, it's sort of like you need to be verified and all that sort of stuff. Like, unfortunately, whether it's training, nutrition, your career, you know, whatever it might be, like consistency, just doing something consistently is super important. I would say, well, what number two? Number two would probably be maybe along the same vein, like something, maybe a word that can describe that sort of, you know, it talks about opportunity of, like, doors always, you know, bigger and better doors always opening. So maybe like the next word is opportunity, in the sense that represents there's always going to be a bigger and better opportunity that will present itself to you, as long as you ensure to react to adversity appropriately. And probably the last one would be perspective. You know, again, we've probably touched on it before, but understanding that, and I get caught up in it still. I still battle with this sometimes, wanting to be that, you know, that young entrepreneurial business S&C coach, ensuring that I don't lose perspective of what really matters. You know, I've got 2 young kids under 5 years old, making sure that what I do doesn't detract from my relationship with them, and making sure that I still give plenty of love to, you know, the wife and time and that sort of stuff too, and not get carried away. You know, get home after a big day and thinking, shit, I've got to start punching some data in because, you know, the girls need to know what their volume was yesterday, and we need to do some programming. Like, so yeah, I think, yeah, consistency, opportunity, and probably perspective would be the big 3 to ensure that you stay level-headed in this game.
Staying level-headed. It's definitely a great piece of advice, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Brother.
I'm just a spud who's just making it as we go.
Yeah, we teach adult PE, mate. That's all we do. You know, and they go out on the court, the floor, the pool, the fucking whatever, the pitch, and they work the magic. It's just us going, yeah, we should probably do less of that. Yep, we should probably do more of this. Yeah, let's do that. Good job. How are you doing? You know, and
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a fucking privilege, mate. And mate, it's an honor and a privilege to sit down and have a conversation with you. Like, I learned a hell of a lot from talking, mate. And yeah, I learned a lot from yourself today, mate. Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity, and looking forward to listening to many more to come, mate. And if there's anything else I can do to help out or support you guys, make sure to let me know.
Thank you, man. I'll make sure I get over to Oz pretty soon, and we'll get a workout in. We'll drink some coffee, maybe some beers. We'll talk some shit. Appreciate it, man.
Sounds good, mate. You take care.
Thank you, bro. Take it easy. Speak soon. Bye, everybody.